The Whispers in the Armchair. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Discovery. The old armchair had always been Eleanor Vance's favorite spot at Pinecroft. Nestled by the grand fireplace in the living room, its velvet upholstery worn smooth by decades of use, it had witnessed countless quiet evenings, hushed conversations, and profound personal discoveries. After her recent adventures, particularly the emotional reunion with David Sterling, Eleanor found herself seeking its familiar embrace more than ever. The gentle creak of its springs was a comforting lullaby, a tangible connection to the enduring spirit of the cottage. Today, however, the armchair was due for a deep cleaning. Clara, Eleanor's meticulous daughter, had insisted. "Mom, it's shedding more dust than wisdom these days," she teased, handing Eleanor a sturdy brush and a bucket of cleaning solution. Eleanor, ever compliant when it came to household chores, and secretly enjoying the simple act of tending to her beloved home, set about the task with quiet determination. She ran her hand along the armrest, feeling for loose threads, pushing down into the crevices. Her fingers brushed against something hard, unexpected, tucked deep into the side pocket, long hidden by the plush, aged fabric. Wasn't a remote or a forgotten book. It felt like a small, flat box. Curiosity piqued. Eleanor worked her fingers deeper, carefully extracting the object. It was a small, rectangular wooden box, perhaps 6 inches long, with a tarnished brass clasp. It looked old, far older than the armchair itself, which had been in the cottage for decades. It felt significant. With a gentle click, the clasp opened. Inside, nestled on a faded blue velvet lining, was a single, leather-bound journal. It was small, unassuming, its pages slightly warped, the leather worn smooth in places. It looked like a child's diary, perhaps, given its size. Eleanor's heart gave a curious little flutter. Another hidden narrative. Pinecroft, it seemed, was a perpetual wellspring of forgotten stories. She carefully lifted the journal. Its pages were filled with neat, childish handwriting, almost too precise for a young hand, yet undeniably the script of a developing penmanship. The first page was dated, in careful ink, May 12, 1993, and below the date, written in block letters, "My Secret Diary," by Mark. Eleanor gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Mark. Her son. Not her biological son, Mark Miller, the one from the 30th year, but her own Mark, her only child, the boy she had raised, who had passed away tragically in his early 20s, over 30 years ago. Mark. Her brilliant, sensitive, quiet Mark. He would have been exactly 8 years old in May 1993. This was his diary, hidden in her favorite armchair. The one he used to climb into and fall asleep in as a little boy. A wave of profound emotion washed over Eleanor, a bittersweet tenderness, a longing for the child she had lost too soon. She turned the pages, her fingers trembling slightly. The entries were short, typical for an 8-year-old. Today I built a fort, saw a really big frog. School was boring. Simple, innocent glimpses into a child's world. But then, an entry caught her eye, dated June 5th, 1993. The lady in the wall talks to me again. She says her name is Sarah. She says I should tell Mommy, but I can't. She knows things about the fire, things that aren't in the newspaper. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The lady in the wall? Sarah? The fire? the Pinecroft Fire, the devastating fire that had consumed the original Pinecroft Manor in 1897, killing the Miller family, leaving only the legend of a hidden child, a stolen twin. That mystery, the one she had dedicated years to solving, the one that had led her to the midwife's journal, to Sarah Miller, the descendant, the one who was swapped at birth. But Mark was 8 years old in 1993. He shouldn't have known about the Pinecroft Fire in such detail, certainly not enough to refer to a lady in the wall or secrets not in the newspaper. The fire was a dusty local legend then, not something a child would be obsessed with. And a lady in the wall? It sounded like a child's vivid imagination, a fanciful play. But the chilling detail about things that aren't in the newspaper, that resonated with Eleanor's own discoveries, decades later, about the midwife's journal and the truth of the stolen child. Eleanor clutched the diary, her mind reeling. Her son, her little Mark, at 8 years old, was writing about the very secret she would spend her later life uncovering. How? How could he have known? And what did it mean, this lady in the wall? The old armchair, her sanctuary, now held a new, profound mystery. A whisper from her lost son, a voice from the past hinting at knowledge he should never have possessed. The tranquility she sought had been shattered by the unsettling discovery of Mark's secret diary, a chilling testament to things he shouldn't have known. Chapter 2: The Whispers in the Walls. Eleanor sat there, rooted to the armchair, the small, leather-bound diary heavy in her hands. The entry dated June 5, 1993, repeated itself in her mind. The lady in the wall talks to me again. She says her name is Sarah. She says I should tell Mommy, but I can't. She knows things about the fire, things that aren't in the newspaper. She remembered that summer vividly. Mark had been unusually quiet, sometimes withdrawn, often found playing alone in his room, or in the older parts of the cottage, seemingly talking to himself. Eleanor, a busy academic then, had dismissed it as a phase, a child's imaginary friend, a developing inner world. She had, in her retrospective guilt, attributed it to her own distractedness, her focus on her career. The painful sting of regret for not paying closer attention now twisted in her gut. Sarah. The name resonated with a chilling specificity. The stolen twin from the 1897 Pinecroft Fire was indeed named Sarah. This was a fact Eleanor had only uncovered decades later through the midwife's hidden journal. How could an 8-year-old Mark have known this? Eleanor began to reread the diary from the beginning, searching for more clues. Most entries were innocuous, typical child musings, but interspersed, like dark threads in a bright tapestry, were the unsettling references. June 10th, 1993. Sarah showed me the scratch on the wall near the fireplace. She says her daddy made it when he was angry. Before the fire. It's small, only I can see it now. Eleanor's eyes darted to the fireplace in her living room. The original Pinecroft Manor had burned down. The current cottage was built on the same foundations, incorporating some salvaged elements. But she knew the living room, specifically the fireplace, was a later addition, not part of the original structure. A scratch on the wall? Unless Mark was seeing something else. June 18th, 1993. Sarah says the bad lady came to take her. She cried very loud. No one heard, only the little sister. She says she misses her twin. Her name is Rose. Rose, Eleanor gasped. The midwife's journal had indeed mentioned the stolen twin's name as Rose. This was no child's vivid imagination. This was knowledge, precise and accurate, that Mark could not have known. Eleanor felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The lady in the wall. Could it be a ghost? The spirit of Sarah Miller, the child who died in the fire, who had been unknowingly swapped with her twin sister, Rose. Was Mark, her sensitive, quiet Mark, somehow communicating with the long-lost spirit of Pinecroft? The thought was terrifying, yet oddly compelling. She remembered peculiar incidents from Mark's childhood that she had also dismissed at the time. Objects moving unexpectedly, faint whispers in empty rooms. A recurring nightmare he had, a fire and crying children, which she had attributed to an overactive imagination or a scary story. Now, they took on a terrifying new meaning. Eleanor decided to re-examine the parts of the cottage Mark frequented most as a child. His old bedroom, now a guest room, felt eerily quiet. But then, as she stood by the window, a faint draft, colder than the rest of the room, brushed against her arm. She noticed a faint, almost invisible seam in the old wallpaper just above the window frame. Could it be a hidden passage? Pinecroft, after all, was known for its secret nooks. She returned to the diary. July 3rd, 1993. Sarah showed me the hidden place, behind the picture. She said it was where she used to hide her toys from her brother. It's cold there. She tells me stories of the old house, before the fire, of her mommy and daddy, and how the bad lady came. A hidden place, behind a picture. Eleanor looked around the guest room. On the wall above the small writing desk hung a framed print of a pastoral landscape, one that had been there for as long as she could remember. Mark's childhood room. She remembered him often staring at that picture. With trembling hands, Eleanor took the picture down. Behind it, the wallpaper was slightly discolored. And then her fingers brushed against a faint, almost imperceptible line. A thin crack forming a faint outline of a small, rectangular panel, hidden beneath layers of old plaster and wallpaper. Her heart pounded. A hidden compartment, in Mark's room, in the very place he had spent his childhood. The whispers in the walls were growing louder, no longer just a child's fanciful imaginings, but a chilling, undeniable link to the enduring secrets of Pinecroft. A connection revealed by her lost son, a truth he knew before she ever did. The veil between worlds, it seemed, was thinner than she had ever dared to imagine. Chapter 3. The Ghost's Lament. Eleanor stood frozen, staring at the faint outline of the hidden panel. Her son's diary, a seemingly innocuous record of a child's world, had become a terrifying roadmap to a hidden reality, the conduit to the spectral history of Pinecroft. With a utility knife, her hands surprisingly steady, Eleanor carefully cut along the faint line. The old plaster crumbled, revealing a small, dark recess. It wasn't large enough for a person, but it was clearly a hidden space, a cavity within the thick old walls of the cottage. The air that seeped from it was cold, musty, carrying the scent of forgotten dust. And something else, something indescribably old. Inside, nestled in the darkness, was a small, crudely made wooden doll, missing one eye, its cloth dress faded and torn. And beside it, a single, delicate silver locket, tarnished with age. Eleanor reached in and retrieved the items. The doll. Mark's diary had mentioned a doll. Sarah says this is her favorite doll. She left it for me. The locket. It was intricately carved with delicate scrollwork. Eleanor fumbled with the clasp. It opened with a soft click. Inside, 2 tiny, faded photographs. On one side, a young girl, no older than 8, with bright, curious eyes and a cascade of dark, curly hair. On the other, another girl, almost identical, with the same bright eyes and cascade of dark, curly hair, but with a slightly wider smile. Twins, Sarah and Rose. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. This was irrefutable proof, not just imagination. This was the physical manifestation of the knowledge Mark had acquired, the tangible connection to the past. This was Sarah's locket. Every strange entry now had a terrifying, profound meaning. August 1st, 1993. Sarah was sad today. She said the Miller family would come back for her, but they never did. She said they moved the tree. She wants to be found. Eleanor had discovered their descendants, the ones from the 30th year, who were indeed Sarah's biological family. And the tree, the old oak tree that stood by the original Pinethroft Manor, a landmark. Eleanor had discovered records that the tree had been moved during the reconstruction of the cottage after the fire, its original location slightly altered. Again, details an 8-year-old Mark could not have known. Eleanor felt a deep, chilling empathy for her son. He had carried this burden, this secret knowledge alone. He had been privy to the lament of a lonely ghost, a child trapped between worlds, seeking recognition, seeking release. And he, in his innocence, had tried to help her, tried to communicate her wishes. She remembered the night Mark died, a car accident, sudden and tragic. He was only 22. Eleanor had been consumed by grief, by the unfairness of it all. But now, a new layer of understanding, of profound sorrow, settled over her. Had Mark's sensitivity to the unseen world contributed to his quietness, his occasional detachment? Had the whispers in the walls, the ghost's lament, been a burden too heavy for his young soul to bear? Eleanor clasped the locket tightly. She had been so focused on uncovering the historical truth, the factual narrative of the Miller family. But Mark, her son, had been directly, intimately involved with the spiritual truth, the enduring presence of the past. He had been the one hearing the ghost's lament, the one experiencing the lingering sorrow of a child lost to fire and deception. A new purpose ignited within Eleanor. She had brought truth to the Miller family, reunited Sarah with her biological parents, and brought healing to Anna Reed. Now she needed to bring peace to the spirit of Sarah Miller. She needed to finally lay the ghost of Pinecroft to rest, not just by uncovering facts, but by acknowledging the enduring, unseen presence that had touched her son's life so profoundly. The old armchair, the hidden diary, the ghost's lament, it all pointed to a final, profound act of compassion, a completion of the cycle of truth and healing. Chapter 4. A Scholar, a Mother, a Seeker. Eleanor's approach to the new, unsettling dimension of Pinecroft's history was twofold: the pragmatic scholar and the grieving mother, both seeking understanding and resolution. She couldn't dismiss Mark's diary as childish fantasy, not with the undeniable evidence of the locket and the doll, and the precise, historically accurate details he had recorded. Her first step was to discreetly research ghostly encounters and child spirits. She devoured books on parapsychology, folklore, and spiritual phenomena. She sought out reputable experts, carefully vetting their credentials, her academic skepticism warring with the undeniable truth of Mark's diary. Most of what she found was anecdotal, speculative, or outright fraudulent. But a few accounts resonated, stories of sensitive individuals, particularly children, connecting with lingering spirits tied to specific locations or traumatic events. She learned about the concept of residual haunting, where emotional energy from a past event imprints itself on a place, and intelligent haunting, where a spirit interacts directly with the living. Mark's diary entries suggested an intelligent haunting, a direct communication with Sarah. Simultaneously, Eleanor returned to her historical research on the Miller family and the 1897 fire, now with a new lens. She looked for details she might have overlooked, mentions of specific toys, habits, or interactions that might connect to Mark's diary entries. She found a fleeting reference in an old newspaper article to the Miller children having a cherished rag doll. Another confirmation. She also sought out an expert in spiritual phenomena, not a charlatan, but a respected academic who approached the topic with an open mind and a scientific rigor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a parapsychologist at a university in New England. Eleanor, ever cautious, presented her case initially as a hypothetical, historical curiosity, gradually revealing the specifics of Mark's diary and the Pinecroft fire. Dr. Reed listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "Ms. Vance," she said, "what you've described, particularly the specific details in your son's diary that correlate with later confirmed historical facts, is compelling. Children often have a more permeable barrier, so to speak, to unseen influences. They are less conditioned by adult skepticism. It's not uncommon for them to perceive things that adults do not." "But a lady in the wall?" Eleanor asked, still struggling with the concept. "Metaphorical, perhaps," Dr. Reed offered, "or a child's literal interpretation of a spirit residing within the structure of the house tied to its history. The key is the consistency of the information, the accuracy of details that were otherwise unknown to him." Eleanor then, with a tremor in her voice, confessed the personal anguish. "My son, Mark, he passed away many years ago. I worry that this burden, this secret knowledge, contributed to his quietness, to his premature departure." Dr. Reed's eyes softened. "It's a natural worry for any parent, but we can't know. What we can do, however, is seek to understand, to bring peace to the spirit, if it is indeed present, and in doing so, perhaps bring peace to your own heart and honor your son's connection to this history." Eleanor knew what she had to do. She needed to acknowledge Sarah, to communicate with her, to offer her what she had desperately sought for decades: recognition and the truth. She returned to Pinecroft, Mark's diary and the locket clutched in her hand. She stood in Mark's old bedroom by the now open hidden panel. She held the locket, the small, faded faces of the twins, Sarah and Rose, staring up at her. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice a little shaky, "if you are here, if you are listening, I know about the fire. I know about Rose, your twin. I know you were swapped. I found the midwife's journal. I found your family. They know the truth. They are grieving your loss and celebrating Rose. You are not forgotten." A profound stillness settled over the room. The cold draft she had felt earlier seemed to dissipate. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread through the air. Eleanor felt a quiet certainty, a sense of something shifting, of a burden lifted. The The scholar was giving way to the mother, the seeker connecting with the unseen, finally offering the peace a child's spirit had yearned for. The next step, she knew, was to share this full, profound truth with her family, to finally lay the ghosts of Pinecroft to rest, both seen and unseen. Chapter 5: Unveiling the Unseen. Eleanor knew she couldn't keep this final, most ethereal layer of Pinecroft's history to herself. Her family, particularly Clara, had been integral to her earlier historical discoveries. Now, they needed to understand the full depth of Mark's experience. She called Clara and her husband Robert and her grandchildren, inviting them to Pinecroft for a weekend. Clara, always supportive but firmly grounded in the tangible, listened patiently as Eleanor, with Mark's diary open on the coffee table, laid out the story. She began with the discovery of the diary itself, a bittersweet memory of her lost son. Then she read the entries aloud, one by one. The lady in the wall talks to me again. She knows things about the fire. The scratch on the wall. Her twin is Rose. The bad lady came to take her. The hidden place behind the picture. Clara listened, her brow furrowed in concentration. She picked up the wooden doll, then the silver locket with the twins' faded photographs. She examined the small, hidden compartment behind the picture in Mark's old room. "Mom," Clara said, her voice quiet, a mix of awe and trepidation. "These details, about Rose, about the swap, you only found these through the midwife's journal, decades later. How could Mark have known this at 8 years old?" Eleanor explained her research into parapsychology, the concept of intelligent haunting, and Dr. Reed's insights. "I believe, Clara," Eleanor said, her voice steady, "that Mark was truly communicating with the spirit of Sarah Miller, the child who died in the fire, whose identity was swapped with her twin. She was lost, forgotten, her story buried, and she sought a connection, a way to be heard. And Mark, my sensitive, perceptive Mark, was the one who could hear her. Robert, a pragmatic engineer, was skeptical, but the tangible evidence of the diary, the locket, and the doll, combined with Eleanor's unwavering conviction, gave him pause. The children, fascinated, listened with wide eyes, their imaginations captivated by the idea of a ghost child. "So what does this mean, Mom?" Clara asked, her voice still filled with a touch of disbelief, but also a dawning understanding. "It means," Eleanor replied, her voice filled with a profound tenderness, "that Mark wasn't just imagining things. He was connecting with a lost soul, a child reaching out from the past. He was trying to tell me, trying to bring her story to light even then. And now, I believe we have completed that task." Eleanor then described her recent conversation with the spirit of Sarah, the words she had spoken to her in the bedroom, acknowledging her story, offering her peace. A quiet solemnity filled the room. The air felt lighter, almost ethereal. Clara looked around the familiar living room of Pinecroft, a place she had known her entire life, and suddenly saw it with new eyes, as a place holding layers of unseen history, of lingering echoes, and of profound, enduring human connections. The following day, Eleanor, Clara, and the grandchildren gathered in Mark's old bedroom. Eleanor held the locket and the doll. "Sarah," she whispered again, her voice clear, "we know your story. We found your family. You are loved. You are remembered. It's time to rest." They placed the locket and the doll, not back into the hidden compartment, but in a small, beautifully carved wooden box that Eleanor had found. They buried the box beneath the old oak tree in the Pinecroft garden, near where the original manor had stood, a symbolic act of laying Sarah's spirit to rest in her true home with her family's memory. As they stood there, a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the ancient tree, a soft whisper that seemed to carry a sense of peace. Clara looked at Eleanor, tears in her eyes, a profound understanding passing between them. The unveiling of the unseen. The final layer of Pinecroft's secrets had brought not fear, but a deep sense of closure and a renewed reverence for the intricate, often mysterious tapestry of existence. The whispers in the armchair, from a child long gone, had finally found their voice, bringing peace to a forgotten spirit and a unique solace to Eleanor's own grieving heart. Chapter 6. The Scholar of Silent Voices. The discovery of Mark's diary and the subsequent understanding of his connection to the spirit of Sarah Miller profoundly reshaped Eleanor's life and her scholarly pursuits. She was no longer just a historian of tangible facts. She had become a scholar of silent voices, a chronicler of the unseen threads that connected past and present. Her next book, tentatively titled The Scholar of Silent Voices, Unearthing the Unseen Histories of Pinecroft, explored the full breadth of her experiences. It delved into the historical records of the Miller family, the discovery of the midwife's journal, the harrowing tale of the child swap, and the emotional reunion of the two Sarahs. But it also bravely ventured into the more ethereal realm, incorporating Mark's diary, the evidence of Sarah's haunting, and Eleanor's own journey from skeptic to seeker. She presented her findings to Dr. Evelyn Reed, the parapsychologist, who, while maintaining scientific objectivity, acknowledged the compelling nature of Eleanor's narrative and the corroborating historical details. Dr. Reed encouraged Eleanor to share her unique perspective, believing that the human experience encompassed more than just the measurable. Eleanor's family, initially bewildered by the spiritual dimension of the Pinecroft story, gradually came to accept it. Clara, though still a pragmatist, found a quiet comfort in the idea that Mark, her beloved brother, had been such a sensitive, unique child. The children, now older, often spoke of Aunt Sarah with a gentle reverence, understanding that her story, while tragic, had found a peaceful resolution. The old armchair remained Eleanor's favorite spot, but now it held a different resonance. It was no longer just a comfortable piece of furniture. It was a silent witness, a sacred space where the veil between worlds had thinned, where a mother had connected with her lost son's secret, and where a forgotten child had finally found peace. She often sat there, reading Mark's diary, remembering his quiet brilliance, his gentle spirit, and finding a deeper understanding of the path he had walked. Her relationship with David Sterling blossomed. He, with his scientific mind, was fascinated by Eleanor's foray into the paranormal. He read Mark's diary with a keen analytical eye, while also offering profound insights into the nature of consciousness and perception. He never dismissed her experiences, always approaching them with an open mind, a true scholar of the unknown. Their shared intellectual curiosity now extended beyond the stars and the printed page into the very fabric of existence. Eleanor and David often discussed the concept of time, not just as a linear progression, but as a complex tapestry where past, present, and even the unseen could intertwine. The Chronos lens, the midwife's journal, Mark's diary, all were instruments in their own ways that allowed access to these interwoven threads. Pinecroft, too, transformed. The lingering sense of unease, the subtle whispers of ghostly presence seemed to dissipate after the burial of Sarah's locket and doll. The cottage, once a place of hidden sorrows, now felt cleansed, lighter, filled with a serene tranquility. It was a home that had finally come to terms with its past, its secrets laid bare, its spirits at rest. Eleanor, in her later years, found a profound sense of purpose. She continued to write, to share her stories, to advocate for the power of uncovering truth in all its forms. She recognized that the greatest mysteries often lay hidden not in grand historical events, but in the quiet corners of individual lives, in the whispers of forgotten children, and in the unspoken knowledge carried by those we love. The whispers in the armchair had led her on an unimaginable journey, from historical research to spiritual revelation, from academic curiosity to profound personal healing. It had confirmed her deepest beliefs in the interconnectedness of all things, in the enduring power of love, and in the idea that even the most tragic losses could, in the grand tapestry of time, lead to an unexpected, profound understanding, a peaceful acceptance, and a legacy that honored both the seen and the unseen.